A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review today, so cheers to that. Today I am bringing you the first book by the author Donald Ray Pollock, and that is Knockemstiff. This is a collection of short stories. Now, he did go on to write The Devil All the Time, which is a fantastic book. I've read this a couple of times, and the movie on Netflix is also phenomenal. And his latest book was, of course, The Heavenly Table. Now, he has only written 3 books. I don't think he's written anything since 2016. He started writing very late in life. I certainly hope that we get more of his work. I absolutely loved it. Now, Knockemstiff is a collection of short stories, as I said, all based around this small rinky-dink town in Ohio called Knockemstiff, hence the title of the book. And a lot of people who have read this have likened it to what they call kind of like hillbilly noir or hillbilly gothic almost. Now, the writing style itself is very good. The tones and the themes I think work very, very well in the context of the book. It did remind me actually a lot of the work of Dr. Luke Carman, An Elegant Young Man, An Intimate Antipathy, and his third book of short stories. The name just escapes me at the moment. In the style and whatnot of the stories themselves, although the subject matter in these is a little more graphic than in Luke's work. If you want to find out more about Dr. Luke Carman's work, I will leave a link in the description below to a review I did of his work a few years ago. Now, this collection has a lot of short stories in it. How many? We get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 short stories. We get a map of the town of Knockemstiff as well, although, to be honest, I never actually referred to the map in the reading of these tales. So I'm going to go through each one, try to make it not spoilery, although in some instances that's going to be an impossibility. I do have pages of notes here so I can remember everything. But let's just get right into the next episode of...
Read a fucking book. 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 People.
Okay, I'm going to start this by taking a drink, of course. By saying that some of the themes and some of the subject matter in these stories gets really, really dark and fucked up. So if you're not interested in that kind of a thing, then you are clearly not going to be interested in this book, and you might want to give it a miss. You also might find parts of these reviews a little bit disturbing. If you think that's going to be the case, please switch over to another video on the channel, one of the comic book reviews or the board game playthroughs or something like that. And yeah, just leave it out. So the first story in this collection is called Real Life. Now, the narrator of this story is a small boy. He's gone to the drive-thru with his parents because he wants to see the new Godzilla film. The parents don't really get along. The father's a bit of a drunk. He's a bit aggressive. The mother keeps kind of antagonizing him. So after the Godzilla film starts, the father takes the boy to the bathroom at the drive-thru, and while there, he's talking to someone and he's using a lot of foul language. And another father asks him, "Can you please not use that language around my own son?" So the narrator's father just starts beating the living shit out of this guy, almost beating him to death. And then he goads the narrator into fighting the other boy, and the narrator breaks that boy's nose, and then kind of all hell breaks loose, and they have to get out of the drive-through really quickly. And the father is sure that the police are going to come after him for what he did. The second story in the collection is called Dynamite Hole. This one was kind of weird. The main character is a mentally slow man who goes around Knockemstiff and collects arrowheads, which he takes to a convenience store and gets money for them and food and whatnot, which they're not really worth anything, but the convenience store owner does it as kind of a favor. Now, we get two stories here. We get the story of this guy stumbling upon this brother and sister by a river, and the brother is fucking the sister, and this guy ultimately ends up killing them. And intertwined with that is the story of how he dodged the draft by leaving home and hiding out in the surrounding kind of wilderness of Knockemstiff while the military were coming looking for him. And when he finally got back to his house, his whole family had just left him there. And so he's been alone this whole time. Really interesting kind of in and out with both stories. A little disturbing about the brother and sister, but ultimately it was very entertaining. And a little heartbreaking at the end when you find out that he's been alone this whole time because his family, knowing what he did, just fucked off and left it. Okay, let's move on. Sorry about the short interruption there. Okay, the next story is called just Knockemstiff. Now, the interesting thing about this story is this is where we start to see characters from other stories kind of entering the narratives. In this case, we follow the manager of a convenience store. He's not the owner. He lives in a caravan behind it. And he works there pretty much every day. It's the only convenience store in town. And this is where the character from the story Dynamite Hole comes to sell the arrowheads, and he actually comes in during this story. Now, the convenience store owner is in love with this woman who is leaving town with this just fucking dirtbag of a guy who's got a job working in the oil fields, and she's getting out of Knockemstiff while she has the chance. But he never did tell her that he was in love with her. In the meantime, these two out-of-towners come through. They stop to get some gas. The woman is taking pictures of the town, and we find out why it's called Knockemstiff, because many years ago, two women were fighting over a man outside of the church, and then the priest came out and said, that's it, Knockemstiff, and that's how the town got its name, or something like that. This is kind of a sad story in as much as this guy's situation never changes, and from his narrative, it's never going to change. We get Hare's Fate. Now, Hare's Fate follows a boy called Daniel who has really long hair, just to be different. His father is always ragging on him about his hair, and then one day his father catches him in the barn having sex with his sister's doll. The father basically freaks out, as any father would, orders the boy to go and get rid of the doll, not to give it back to the sister because it's covered with his, jizz and whatnot. Then takes a knife and basically cuts all the boy's hair off, just kind of chops his hair all the way down with this knife. The kid, Daniel's fed up with this, so he basically starts to hitchhike out of Knockemstiff, where he's picked up by a truck driver. The truck driver seems nice. We know that's not going to last very long. Ends up taking Daniel back to his house, which is, hundreds of miles away. And proceeds to give Daniel some pills and some alcohol. Daniel explains to this guy exactly what happened, why his hair is the way it is and whatnot. And the truck driver goes and gets him his mother's old wig. His mother has long since died of cancer, and tells Daniel to put the wig on. Daniel thinks this is a little weird, but he does it anyway. And then the truck driver tries to get intimate with him, and that's where that story ends. We don't actually know what happens to Daniel in the end there. Next up comes pills. This is just two guys who decide to steal a stash of pills to make some money so they can get out of Knockemstiff. They break into the dealer's house, steal the pills, but end up using their entire stash and never actually going anywhere. And then at the end, one of the guys just takes 2 last pill bottles and just walks off to get out of town. I don't know if I'm saying this name right. Gigathamancy. This was a weird one. This starts out with 2 neighbors. They're young kids, and they are basically, setting fire to anthills and just doing what young kids do, torturing bugs and whatnot. The main point of this story, however, is the main character's father leaves, leaving him and his mum alone, and his mother starts telling him all about these famous serial killers, and then gets her son to pretend to be a different serial killer, and kind of gets intimate with them. Not sexual, although that might actually happen in the stories. It's never described, but it's things like she gets him to hold a knife up against her throat while she's dressed in a very provocative nightgown, and she's like, "Who are you pretending to be?" And the kid's like, "Ted Bundy tonight." Shit like that. Shots Bridge. The main character in this story is this guy called Todd, and his aunt, he lives with his aunt, and his aunt dies, leaves him some money and a car. His uncle comes and basically says, now that she's dead, fuck off, this is my house. And so Todd is just living in his car, and he befriends Frank. Frank is one of the characters from the story Pills, who went around kind of stealing the drugs. They find this abandoned fish camp down under this place called Shots Bridge, where they live there, and they, they do drugs and they drink and they eat whatever they can scrounge. It's a pretty fucking pitiful existence. And then Frank asks Todd if he really is gay. There's a rumor that Todd is gay, and Todd kind of confirms it, at which point Frank becomes enraged, beats the hell out of Todd, sexually assaults him. And then when Todd wakes up, Frank is gone, and as Frank was his only friend in the world, Todd is basically left alone and betrayed. Lard. This is about a guy called Dwayne, whose father and friends are always ragging on him for being a virgin and not having a girlfriend. So the friends decide to take him to this girl called Geraldine, where they go and they basically have sex with her. And she is a girl with Down syndrome. Dwayne doesn't go through with it. They have another friend called Lard. He's this big fat guy who's a bit slow, and he makes money by letting people throw darts at him because he says it doesn't hurt him. And Lard just questions Dwayne about why he didn't go through with it, things like that. Lard was kind of a soft-hearted story, in as much as you got to see the human side of some of these really disturbed characters. Fish Sticks. This is about a guy named Dell. When we meet Dell, he's in a laundromat with his girlfriend Geraldine. Geraldine has mental issues and lives in a group home. Dell is washing his jeans in the laundromat because his cousin Randy has just died, and the black jeans are the only thing he thinks that are appropriate to wear to a funeral. So that's why he's washing them. He starts to reminisce about when he and his cousin Randy were kids. They got I don't know if a lot of you remember, in the back of comic books, you used to be able to send away coupons to get like bodybuilding manuals for Charles Atlas and that kind of stuff. So when they were kids, they did that. Randy got really into bodybuilding, and Dell didn't. Dell instead got into reading this book called Reds, and it was kind of the way he decided to live his life. He convinces Randy that they need to get out of Knockemstiff and they need to go to Florida. They get down to Florida on the bus. All the while on the bus journey, Dell is reading Randy passages from this book. While in Florida, they've got no money. They're hungry. They're living under a pier. And they're befriended by this hot dog man who gives them some food to eat and says, if you want to make some money, come to this hotel room, or motel room, I should say. Pardon me. So they go there, and this guy basically wants Randy to give him a blowjob, makes Del stand in the corner. And when Randy does it, the man just gives him some coins, and Randy's like, I sucked your dick. I should get more money than this. And the guy's like, fuck off. So they knock him out by smashing him in the head with a lamp, and they rob him. Then we go to Randy's hospital room, where he and Del are talking about that trip to Florida and the book and everything like that. Randy's basically dying of an enlarged heart because he's taken so many bodybuilding drugs and things like that. And this isn't the first time bodybuilding is going to come up in this collection. He begs Randy Randy begs Del to give him a cigarette, which he ends up using to set his own bed on fire, and that is how he dies. And while reminiscing about this, Del basically has sex with Geraldine in the laundromat. Back Teen is just about two guys who get off on huffing paint. They pretty much, that's all they talk about. Their different hallucinations they've had from huffing paint. Discipline. This is the second bodybuilding story. This is about a father who has pushed his 18-year-old son into bodybuilding heavily. He wants his son to become Mr. South Ohio. And he's giving his son drugs, forcing his son to do all this bodybuilding stuff. He himself used to be a bodybuilder. And one day as they're driving, they see the son's main rival. It's winter, it's freezing cold, and this guy is out on the sidewalk in front of like a McDonald's in his Speedo trunks doing body poses, and it's this thing called like extreme posing that this rival's father invented. The main character doesn't want his son to do it. His son wants to do it. Ultimately, his son sneaks away and does it one night after ingesting a whole ton of steroids. And when the father goes and finds him, the kid is dead of hypothermia. So the father, in his grief, goes on this mad bender and then decides, you know what, this is what I have to do. And then he goes out into the snow, takes all his clothes off, and starts doing bodybuilder poses. What's next? Assailants. Now this has Del and Geraldine from the Fish Sticks story. By the way, the reason that story was called Fish Sticks is because Geraldine carries cold fish sticks around in her purse and just gives them to people. That's it. Now Assailants finds Del and Geraldine now married, living together, and they have a kid. Geraldine cannot leave the house because she was attacked on the street one night, and she's just scared. Her and Del fight all the time, and then one day she's like, or one night I should say, she's like, Del, you're going to look after the baby. I'm going out for a night on the town. And Del's like, yeah, sure you are. You never go out for a night on the town. She gets all dressed up, puts on her makeup and everything, is about to leave, and then she runs and locks herself in her room and turns on the TV, and Del's like, well, fuck this, I'm going. He goes out, he goes to a convenience store where the woman behind the counter is a bit flirty with him, and then brings up Geraldine and how fucking weird she is and whatnot. And this kind of triggers something in Del because it's still his wife. He still has a kid with her. So he goes out to the car and he waits, and he has a balaclava, and he's going to assault this woman. And we find out from this short detail here, he was the one that assaulted Geraldine and forced her to stay in the house. It's just something that he did. So I thought that was a really good kind of little twist. It was a great story, and I am a fan of Del and Geraldine, the characters from the Fish Stick story. Okay, what's next? Rainy Sunday. This woman has a husband with brain damage. He got brain damage in a car accident. She leaves him at home on a rainy Sunday after her niece calls and says, do you want to go into town and hit up some guys? So they go to town and they just troll around looking for guys that they can kind of rip off their money. Now, this story wasn't the best, but it was cool to see these characters again, the aunt and the niece, because they actually appeared way back in the story back teen about the huffing of the paint. So they were two women that went into the same donut store as the two guys from that story. Holler. This is about a gentleman who is living with his girlfriend, Sandy. I think her father is dying. Her mother lives there too, but this guy is basically taking it upon himself to look after the dying father. One night, he and Sandy decide to go out to a bar. While they're at the bar, he goes to the bathroom. She leaves with another guy. He gets a little despondent. When he goes back to her house, he explains to her mother what happened. He goes in to check on the father, and the father is dead with nothing tying him. Here, he ends up just walking out the door with nothing and leaving. I start over. This is about a couple whose son was due to join the Marines. He went to a party, went missing for 3 days, and then was dumped out the front of a hospital. And when he awoke from his coma, the doctor said he has brain damage from drug overdose. So all of their plans, the parents' plans, have been ruined. So they are driving out one day to get ice cream. They've got the kid, or the young man, I should say, in the back of the car. And they're going through this ice cream place that has a drive-through. And the mother and father are having an argument. And then the father sees this car of teenagers that are mocking him and mocking his son. And he gets out and he just starts smashing their car and beats the shit out of one of them. Gets back in the car and basically drives off. And the mother's like, you're going to jail for this. And that's the end of that story. Blessed. This was a really good one. The main character gets this job with a known mobster who starts using him for like robberies and whatnot. And because of this, he makes a ton of money. And he and his wife buy this beautiful house and they have a kid. And then on one of the jobs, the guy falls off a roof and breaks his collarbone, damages his back, and can no longer work for this mobster guy. The mobster takes him to a hospital, but basically tells him to fuck off. I'm not going to see you again. The guy becomes addicted to painkillers. He starts drinking. He starts getting really violent and aggressive with his son. His son doesn't talk. The guy thinks his son has mental problems or he's deaf. He and the wife are always fighting. They're living in this trailer that smells like shit because there's no toilet. It's just a hole in the ground that's cut into the middle of the trailer floor. And the father keeps telling the son, listen, if you don't start talking, I'm going to throw you in that hole and you'll never get out. And the son's kind of traumatized by this. They get this huge argument. The only way they can make money is by the wife selling blood, but she's like, I'm fed up with this. This is fucking ridiculous. So they get this huge argument. The guy leaves the trailer, and when he comes back, he hears laughter and talking, and he's like, what the fuck's going on? He looks through the window, and his son is talking to the wife. And he has been able to do this all along, and the son is a different person when the father's not there. The father considers leaving. Ultimately, he goes back inside the trailer and the laughter stops. Really, really good story. Okay, Honolulu. This is very simply a man with dementia. He's kind of early Alzheimer's, and his wife is trying to get him to remember things like, there's a photograph on the wall. When I get back from the store, I want you to tell me 5 people in that photograph. Ultimately, all he remembers is a time when he was in the military with a guy from Texas. They were in Honolulu and they pick up a prostitute. They go to her apartment, or her bedroom, I should say. The guy from Texas is about to have sex with her when the guy who now has dementia realizes that the woman's baby's in the corner. He basically freaks out, picks up the baby, runs down the street, and nurses the kid till the guy from Texas has stopped doing it with the prostitute. And finally, we have the fights. This was a wonderful bookend to this collection because it involves the kid from the first story who watched his dad beat the guy up in the drive-through bathroom, but he's much older now. He's a recovering alcoholic who is convinced by his sponsor to go back and visit his parents because his father is in fact dying. He goes back to Knockemstiff, goes back to visit his parents. His mother is very nice with him. His younger brother is basically in tight with his father, and his father is obsessed with boxing and fighting. And the guy kind of tries to connect, but realizes he's never going to have a chance to connect with his father, and then ultimately leaves with a lot of things unsaid and a lot of things kind of not finished. So that was Knockemstiff by Donald Ray Pollock. I absolutely love this collection, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in, dare I say, hillbilly gothic. I think that's a very fitting description. A whiskey-stained classic, said Time Out. I am very much looking forward to reading The Devil All the Time again, because this is set in the town of Knockemstiff. And this is a fantastic read as well. Now, if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Check out the reviews I did of Luke Carman's work. There is also another Plaguelands Media project page coming up called, well, it's already up actually, by Ian Van Gammett. I draw nasty things. I will leave a link down below in the description so you can go check out his art there. Really great stuff. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter. You can go and check out our work on Amazon if you are interested in any of that stuff. But most importantly, take a drink. Stay safe. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, read a fucking book, people.